Hello, everyone. Please grab your virtual seats and get comfortable. Hi. So, thank you, David, for welcoming everyone in the chat. Do not hesitate to integrate in there. I'm Jennifer Han. I'm CMO of Ausha, and I'm thrilled to have you all here today. Hello, Claudia. Hello, Sharon. So, guys, we have an exciting session ahead about a hot topic, podcasting on YouTube. And to tell you more about that, I'm joined by the fantastic YouTube team to share everything you need to know. Without further ado, let me introduce Erica Kornbluh and Emma Sweet. Would you both like to say a few words about yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Erica. I'm a strategic partner manager at YouTube, and I will hand it over to Emma.
Thank you. So I'm Emma Sweet, and I'm the product activation manager for podcasts at YouTube.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And you have to know that our community is eager to learn more about podcasting on YouTube. And it seems you guys have been innovating a lot lately. So we are excited to hear all the latest updates. But first, let me quickly explain why I wanted to bring this topic today. The first thing you need to understand is how YouTube can be a powerful channel to boost your visibility and grow your audience. Let's look at the 2023 podcast landscape study made by our good friends at Sounds Profitable. Let me shout out Tom Webster and Brian Barletta that we love. They explored which channels podcast listeners use to discover new podcasts. And this information is gold for podcast publishers like you, because it helps identify which channels to prioritize for audience growth. Just a little side note, similar studies like the one from Edison and more often highlight, to be honest, the same channels with only minor differences in rankings or percentages. But we always fall back to the same channels. And as you can see, YouTube's ranks very high. It will be a missed opportunity not to leverage such an important channel. And Erica and Emma will dive deeper into its strengths shortly. I also want to mention that there are other channels worth focusing on, which we will cover in upcoming Ausha webinar. But don't wait for future's webinar. You can start optimizing these channels right now with Ausha. And many of you know, Ausha is the new generation hosting platform dedicated to audience growth. And what sets us apart is our complete suite of podcast marketing tools that helps publishers increase their visibility across all discoverability channels, all within a seamless user experience. We provide podcast specialized tools for each of these channels and even more. Our mission is to ensure that your podcast reaches full potential. And speaking of expanding your reach, let's focus back on YouTube and see how it can play a crucial role in your podcast growth. In this session, we'll focus on audio-first podcasts, meaning that these are podcasts designed primarily for listening rather than the ones created from videos and made for video purpose only. By the end of this session, you should know more about how to distribute your audio-first podcast on YouTube, how to optimize your podcast visibility on it, how to monetize your content on it, and also how to use YouTube Analytics to grow your audience. If you have questions, my team, Emma, Odile, and David, is on the chat to help. Please use the question tab at the bottom right of your window so we can easily identify your queries. Otherwise, they will be lost in the flow of the chat. At the end of the session, we'll answer live some questions with a selection that my team will do along the way. That being said, are you ready, guys? If he has put the fire emoji in the chat. And let's see who's the fastest at the emoji keyboard. Most of the time we'll have fire emoji. Nicola just said fire emoji. Okay, that's a great hack. But Victoria, I think, ran the race. Yeah, guys. Okay, now that you're all warmed up, Erica and Emma, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. As I said before, my name is Erica, and I'm a strategic partner manager for podcasts here at YouTube. Thank you so much for joining our training today. It's really amazing to see all of the interest and excitement for this product that we've launched and continue to expand. So before I begin, sound off in the comments or use the fun emoji reactions. I'm curious to know who here has already produced podcast content. "308 episodes. That's awesome, Andy.
Wow, impressive, Andy.
Okay, so here's a follow-up question. Who already has their podcast uploaded to YouTube? Seeing a lot of yeses. Wonderful. Okay, so for those of you who didn't just comment, I would hope and I would think that you're just here to learn more about podcasting on YouTube. If so, you are definitely in the right place. Today, myself and Emma will be sharing with you more about podcasts on YouTube, and we'll also, as Jennifer said, be opening up the floor to the end for some Q&A. So here's a quick overview of the agenda. I won't stay here for too long, so we can get right into it. So podcasting is evolving, and podcasters on YouTube are at the forefront of that change. No longer are fans only interested in hearing what podcasters have to say, but they're also interested in seeing the conversation take place, so they can really feel like they're in the room with you. Many users, particularly those in Generation Z, who we'll talk about a lot in this presentation, use YouTube to watch podcasts and deepen their engagement with their favorite shows. YouTube is now an established podcast destination with creators using YouTube to build out these multi-format viewing experiences. And it's also becoming increasingly evident that creators are getting involved in podcasts to talk through various topics that are important to them. And they're becoming thought leaders in these respective topics. So a great creator who is using YouTube to build out multi-sensory viewing experiences is Rotten Mango. Stephanie's true crime podcast is available in both audio and video, just on different platforms. And with all of you being experts in audio, you may be wondering why video is so popular. So for hosted shows on any topic, seeing the host's face helps them form a bond between the host and the viewer and leads to better information recall. For interview shows with guests, video allows viewers to see these real-life conversations taking place, and it really makes the experience a lot more personal. For sports and news podcasts, being able to see the actual highlight or news clip being discussed on screen rather than just listening to it makes it all a lot more memorable. And then even for true crime podcasts like Rotten Mango, which are more narrative in structure, they still can really benefit from these visual elements to make the experience more rich. So examples are you can show, court documents and other visual aids that bring the story to life. And I think the numbers that Stephanie has seen on Rotten Mango, really speak for themselves. So with podcasts thriving in both video and audio, whether you're watching at home or listening on the go, we want YouTube to be a place where you can find whatever it is you're looking for. Bridging the gap between audio and video is part of what we like to call the next frontier in podcasting. So for example, imagine that you're watching your favorite podcast on YouTube on your computer at home, but then you need to hop in the car and go to the market or go pick your kid up from school. You'd have to get into your car, likely open another podcasting app, search for the specific podcast episode, remember the timestamp that you left off on, and then fast forward to that same timestamp to start listening to the podcast at the same place where you left off. Then later, let's say if you wanted to go back and listen to your podcast again on your computer or on your phone, you'd have to do this process all over again in reverse. So with seamless integration and transition between YouTube Music and YouTube Main, we've made this once complicated multi-step audio to video process much simpler and easier. And we only plan to continue to build and expand new features to become an even better place for all podcasts in service of bridging the gap between audio and video with very seamless, likely one-button transitions. So I want to zoom out quickly for a second to discuss YouTube at large. As I'm sure you already know, YouTube is one of the largest digital content platforms in the world. We have over 2 billion monthly logged in users, so YouTube can provide access to a vast global audience, and YouTube is one of the most popular platforms for US listeners, and it's only becoming larger around the world as we speak. So in addition to being one of the largest podcast platforms in the world, YouTube is also the most frequently used by new podcast audiences. So studies such as this one from Cumulus Media highlight how YouTube is a key location for new to podcasting users to discover podcasts. And 43% of weekly podcast listeners in the US say that YouTube is one of the services they use when listening to podcasts. So in an interesting numerical coincidence, Edison also found that 84% of these Gen Z listeners have engaged with podcasts that had a video component, which means that the Gen Z audience is not only finding podcasts on YouTube, but they're increasingly familiar with podcasts as a visual medium. Again, according to Cumulus Media, 37% of listeners, podcast listeners, prefer to listen to podcasts with videos they actively watch while listening, and 40% of podcast newcomers, so a slight jump in percentage there, that includes those who started listening in the past year, prefer the same. So in short, our growth as a platform is a result of how video podcasts are resonating with consumers, especially this younger generation and those who are newer to the podcasting space. So now you're probably interested in learning why and maybe even how YouTube has brought podcasters such success. So one of the key things we've heard from podcasters is how YouTube can help them find new audiences. We've seen this in third-party studies like the ones we just went over, and we hear it directly from partners. So as you can see in this slide, ESPN recently discussed how they found that since bringing their podcast content to YouTube, they haven't seen an impact on their numbers across other platforms, and they found that they're reaching a new audience through their YouTube presence. So YouTube's growth across different surfaces is great news for you, since our scale combined with our search and discovery capabilities will help bring new eyes to your content organically. Summarized in a great quote here from creator and podcaster Marques Brownlee. So historically, podcast discovery has been limited, with people relying on word of mouth and top chart lists. Marketing shows is expensive, and even sharing an episode with your friends can be challenging due to platform paywalls and high switching costs.
Erica, sorry, I think we cannot see your slide anymore. It went all black.
Oh, that's strange.
You can, yeah. Yeah, we don't see the slide anymore.
Share and reshare?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let's try again. What about now?
Yeah.
It's
Perfect.
back?
Can you
Okay,
guys,
great.
precise in the chat if you can see. Okay, Andy said good. Perfect.
Wonderful.
Go back
Okay.
on. Perfect. Thank
Great.
you, Erica.
That's okay. Thank you. So historically, podcast discovery has been limited, like I said, with people relying on word of mouth and top chart lists. Marketing shows is expensive, and even sharing an episode with your friends can be challenging due to platform paywalls and high switching costs. And this is where YouTube can really help. So as the second largest search engine in the world, our search capabilities and recommendation algorithms help you reach more people interested in your content. User-to-user sharing is simple, and our clipping features allow you to drop users right into the specific parts of the podcast that would interest them the most. The slide switched for everyone, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so now let's take a look at YouTube's content ecosystem as a whole and how this all connects. So while we know that discovery can happen at multiple touch points, we are seeing an abundance of discovery happening on YouTube Shorts. So outside of YouTube, podcasters are posting their short form clips separately from where viewers consume the actual long form podcast. This makes the bridge between short form and long form kind of clanky and difficult. So on YouTube, we see that users' discovery on shorts, both from trends and finding their favorite creators' content, leads into long form streams and views on YouTube Music and on YouTube Main. On the flip side, when a fan becomes attached to a certain podcast, we also see that affinity translate into shorts creation and participation, starting the cycle that you see in the slide all over again. And as both the YouTube platform and our podcast product continue to evolve, this diagram will only continue to evolve alongside it. I also want to quickly call out an audience study where we learned that Gen Z audiences have expressed a habit of using short form content to help them discover things they want to watch longer versions of. This finding is a core reason why our product teams continue to work to bridge Shorts and YouTube Main. One of the implementations as part of that bridge is that YouTube recommendations now consider recent long-form videos from channels the viewer watches on Shorts. This makes it even easier for creators to find new audiences and to bridge those audiences to long-form content all in one ecosystem. So, and then another cool feature I want to highlight is that with YouTube Studio and all of the tools that come along with it, podcast creators can create shorts directly from their long form videos. Clips can also be generated that appear on your channel page and within search. So the features we just went through are all important, but I now want to talk about the income your content can bring in. So a really great benefit of YouTube is what's called our YouTube Partner Program, or commonly known as the acronym YPP. So there are various criteria that are required in order to qualify and be eligible for YPP. And so you can either get 1,000 subscribers with 4,000 valid public watch hours in the last 12 months, or you can get 1,000 subscribers with 10 million valid public shorts views in the last 90 days. So if you meet either of those criteria, you are eligible to apply via YouTube Studio, and you can learn more about how to apply, the steps to apply, and more on eligibility in our Help Center. So that is support.google.com/YouTube, or if you do a quick Google search for YouTube Help Center, you should get to the Help Center very quickly.
Your creativity.
Okay, so once you're part of YPP, we have a suite of monetization capabilities. Today, it's estimated that the top 1% of podcasters are generating around 99% of the industry's revenue, with almost all of it coming from direct sales by the podcasters themselves. We're looking to change that by helping podcasters leverage new and different revenue streams with our already existing monetization tools. So these include ad-based revenue, which you're likely the most familiar with, SVOD revenue, and alternative monetization, often shortened to Alt-Mon. So again, let's start with the form of monetization that's likely the most familiar to you, and that's ad-based revenue. So video ads, which are YouTube's core focus, have higher CPMs than audio ads, meaning that you have an opportunity to increase your revenue by enabling video ads on YouTube. We have also recently launched 15-second non-skippable audio ads with 30-second audio ads in beta. Partners like yourself will also see SVOD, so that stands for subscription video on demand revenue, and SVOD revenue is calculated from the non-music share, which is the same as any non-music video. So lastly, we've developed a whole suite of tools beyond ads that allow you to leverage and monetize your YouTube fandom and engagement in really unique ways, including commerce, channel memberships, paid digital goods like Super Chat and Super Stickers. So similar to building your community on YouTube, monetization doesn't need to happen across platforms. It really can all happen in one place. And I want to make sure to mention that you can keep your host-read ads as part of your overall monetization strategy. They are considered paid product placements on YouTube today and are fine to include as long as they abide by our sponsored content policies. So with that, I am done, and I will kick it over to Emma to talk more about the product itself.
Great. Thanks, Erica. We can flip to the next, actually 2 slides. So now that Erica has covered some of the background on YouTube and the why, I'm going to cover the what and the how. So what podcasts on YouTube look like today and how you can upload your podcast to YouTube, either through video, audio, or using Ausha. So when we say that podcasts are available on YouTube, we mean on Surface's main music living room, which Erica talked about a little bit, that's YouTube on TVs. And these services are all powered by YouTube Studio, where podcasters upload their shows. So when you upload your podcast into YouTube Studio, it's then automatically made available across all of those surfaces at once. So there's no separate upload process for YouTube Music versus YouTube Main. It's all in one go. And these services all complement one another. With YouTube Main, we've enabled consumers to watch podcasts and to discover new shows. With YouTube Music, we've expanded a user's choice for how to consume podcasts on YouTube, introducing free backgrounding, free downloading, and the ability to toggle between the audio and video for a podcast, all within the context of the app. So it's a little bit more optimized for audio first listening. And then with YouTube Music, we've enabled users to watch on the big screen, either leaned in as entertainment, really however they want to in the home, even in the background while they're cooking or anything like that. And so all of these different surfaces are for kind of different user behaviors, and they also sync up. So Erica was talking a little bit earlier about how if you're watching on desktop with YouTube, If you then decide that you need to start your commute or go on a walk, if you then open the YouTube Music app, you'll be able to pick up right where you left off and vice versa. So next I'll cover what features we have available on each of these surfaces. So first with YouTube Main, we've launched features for users to help increase the visibility and the discoverability of podcasts. Things like youtube.com, our destination page, official search cards to make it easier to find podcasts in search, badging on the search and watch pages, either with the word podcast or with the name of your show, and that links back to your full episode playlist. And then lastly, the podcast tab on the channel page, where if I'm a viewer and I'm going to your channel, I can easily see what podcasts you've uploaded by going to that tab. It's right next to the live and the shorts tabs. But I would say actually the features on the back end and the algorithmic changes have really made all the difference for creators like yourselves. So we've done a couple things here. One, we now recommend more podcast content to podcast consumers. I realize that sounds a little bit obvious, but if you think about it, podcasts are relatively new to YouTube as a product. Podcasts have been on YouTube for a long time, but it's only been recent that we've started to build a product and feature set around podcasts. And so for us, that was a whole new thing of making sure that if I'm consuming podcasts, I'll have more podcast content recommended to me. What we've also done is that we recognize that podcasts behave a little bit differently on YouTube than other content. So if I'm watching a series, I'll likely want to watch the next episode in a series as opposed to a different YouTube video. And so if I'm in a serialized playlist, we'll now recommend that next episode to a viewer. But of course, I say this, YouTube isn't just home to podcast content. And that's really one of the biggest advantages of discoverability for creators, is that your content is being recommended alongside a breadth of YouTube content overall, which means that you're able to access audiences that might not be podcast consumers typically, but they discover your show, and all of a sudden they become a podcast consumer in that way. So next up, YouTube Music. I mentioned how with YouTube Music, you can watch podcasts, but really you can listen to them as well. And so I've talked about how we have free backgrounding, downloading, and that audio video toggle, but there's also features that we've launched, for example, auto downloads, the ability to sort playlists by newest to oldest, oldest to newest, or whichever order was set by the creator. And we have more features coming later this year into early next year. Like Marcus Played, that one's been in demand for a long time. The ability to trim silences to make an episode just a little bit shorter for a listener. Enhanced playback speeds, faster playback speeds, all of the common podcast features that you can find in other apps will launch in YouTube Music, as well as improvements to the in the car experience. Next, I'll just cover where you find podcasts within the app. So first, on Home and Explore, there's a podcast chip at the top of the page. Now in France, I don't believe have actually launched this chip yet, but it's coming within the next few weeks, where you'll be able to see that podcast chip on the top of Home and Explore and filter down into a dedicated podcast experience where you can see shelves like keep listening to episodes where you left off, new episodes of shows that are in your library, top podcasts and episodes by genre, all of these different ways to discover new content or to pick up where you left off. You can, in all markets, search for podcasts in the app and then filter your search results by either podcast shows or episodes. And then in any market, you can add podcast shows to your library, where then you can see that full content catalog and in your new episodes playlist, new episodes of shows that are in your library. And then lastly, I've talked about Living Room. This is similar to the experience on YouTube Main, where we have a dedicated podcast tab that allows you to then filter down and see similar shelves to the ones that I just talked about. But within Living Room, you can search for podcasts, you can subscribe to channels and shows, etc. So now that we've covered what the features look like, let's talk about how you actually upload your podcast to YouTube. So I'll start by just setting the scene of what we mean when we say podcasts on YouTube. A podcast is a playlist, and podcast episodes are videos within that playlist. So this is really important, and I emphasize this for a couple of reasons. We do see creators often either just having their podcast episodes in a playlist, but the playlist isn't properly designated as a podcast. So in YouTube Studio, if you have a playlist already for your content, you'll want to make sure that you've set that playlist as a podcast. And then sometimes we also see, if I created a channel for my podcast and it's just my podcast content, creators will sometimes just have the videos on the channel, but the videos aren't in a playlist and the playlist isn't designated. So all to say, podcasts to us are playlists. And so all of your episodes should be within that container, and then make sure it's designated as a podcast. Now, when we say you should add your podcast to YouTube, there's a couple tools that I'll get into of how to do that, but we really recommend in your podcast having just full episodes of your show. So on your channel, and I think I saw a question on this in the chat of should shorts be on a different channel or on the same? It's up to you, and we can talk about some of the nuances there, but our general recommendation is that you keep everything on one channel, just so you can build your audience, especially if you're starting a new channel and you're new to YouTube. It's really hard to build an audience. And so separating any content out into separate channels is going to make that a lot harder. But what we recommend is that on your dedicated channel, whether that's for your company, your network, or if it's just for your podcast, you have a podcast playlist with just full episodes of your show. And then you can utilize other things like playlists or just having videos on your channel or shorts for things like if you wanted to not only have your full episode playlist, but also have separate playlists for each season, or a playlist for a guest that you had and it's clips from that episode. So there's 5 videos in that playlist. Or if you wanted to organize by themes, you can do that as well. And so playlists should be used at your disposal. But the podcast, we would recommend for each podcast that you have, you just have one. And like I said, just full episodes. And the reason for that is that you can think about your full episode playlist almost like your RSS feed, where you really want to make sure it's clear to users where they should go to access the latest episodes of your podcast. Your podcast, as I mentioned, when you upload it to YouTube, it also goes into YouTube Music. And so think about it that way, of if I'm a user on YouTube Music and I see 5 different podcasts for your show, it's going to be really confusing for me. And it's also going to split your listenership across all of your different podcasts. So that's why we don't recommend having full episodes, season 1, season 2, like all designated, because it just splits up your listenership. So again, just one podcast for each show. Think about it like your RSS feed. That's what's fed on YouTube Main, YouTube Music, and in Living Room. So the other guidance that we have is show names. So we do often see creators will have the name of their show, all episodes, or full episodes, or video. Just make it the name of your show. You want to, again, make it really easy for a user to find your podcast on YouTube as they would on another podcasting platform. And so if you keep that consistent, that's the easiest way for a user to know this is the same podcast that I've listened to on Spotify, or this is the podcast that I'm familiar with from this creator. So you don't need to do anything fancy here, just keep the names consistent. All right, so next slide. There are a couple ways to get your podcast onto YouTube. I'll just highlight them at a high level and then we'll dive into each. So first, you can do it directly in YouTube Studio, as I've been talking about. But more recently, you can also do this via Ausha. And so I'll pass it over to Jennifer in a couple slides just so she can dive into that further. So within YouTube, number one, make sure you have a YouTube channel. That's first and foremost. But then there's 2 ways to upload your podcast into Studio. And it depends if you're a video first creator or an audio first creator. So for video first, we have a tool that we call show creation, which is basically just creating a podcast playlist on YouTube and uploading videos to that playlist. Or as I talked about, if you already have a playlist, you can set it as a podcast. That's all contained within show creation. But if you're audio first and you want to use your RSS feed to upload to YouTube, you can now do that as well. And so in YouTube Studio, you can actually submit your RSS feed. And then what we do is that as new episodes are added to your RSS feed, we'll upload them to YouTube on your behalf. I'll dive pretty deeply into this in a couple slides. And I know there tends to be a lot of questions on this, so we can cover this more in depth as well. So first, this is what it looks like to use show creation. So you can either create a new podcast or set an existing playlist as a podcast. And then for this, you'll need details like your podcast title, description, the visibility for your episodes. So YouTube, you can do public, private, unlisted. Obviously, we recommend public if you want to actually have your episodes be viewed by consumers. And then you'll need your Square podcast thumbnail that you use on other platforms. If you already have a playlist for your podcast, you then go into the playlist menu within YouTube Studio, choose the playlist that you want to designate and hit that 3-dot menu, and then you can choose Set as Podcast. The one recommendation that we have here, I talked a lot about just having full episodes in your playlist, If you're going to do this, we just recommend that you take a review first of what content is in your playlist and making sure that it's clean of any clips, shorts, or content owned by other channels. And then with RSS upload, we'll go into this a little bit more in detail, but essentially for this, it's still in YouTube Studio. You're still going to hit create in the upper right-hand corner and new podcast, but then you'll choose the bottom option for submit RSS feed. So quickly, one of the questions that we get a lot is, should I do both? Am I supposed to do both show creation and RSS because they're both available? Generally, our answer is no. You should choose one or the other. And as I mentioned, if you're a video creator, you should use show creation. If you're an RSS creator, you should use RSS upload or do it through Ausha. But there are instances in which you might want to do both. So first is that if you're starting out and you're dipping your toe into video, but you have an entire back catalog of episodes that you still want available on YouTube, you can actually connect a podcast playlist to an RSS feed. So once you connect that, you can use your RSS feed to upload your entire back catalog up to today, for example, and then I can set the visibility to private and then just upload my video episodes from there. And then also in doing so, the other use case that we recommend doing both is that if you can't do video for all of your episodes, say you don't have the resourcing to do it for every single one, or you just want to experiment with doing it for certain episodes where your guest and your host are in the same room, you can use RSS to fill in the gaps. And so what you do in that case is that for each episode from the RSS feed that you want available on YouTube, you'd flip the visibility of that individual episode to public, so that then if you don't have video for a certain episode, you can use the RSS uploaded episode instead. So I think I'm passing it over to Jennifer to talk about how you can do this even more easily.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. So guys, if you choose to publish from Ausha, meaning that you can host your podcast and publish to YouTube from the same place, you manage your podcast for all of the podcast apps, you might appreciate a bit for more convenience and less mental load. Well, on top of saving time and simplifying the process, we also offer several additional perks. First, the automatic audio to video conversion. Your audio will be converted to a dynamic video with audio waves, as you can see on the screen. A nice way to also signal to YouTube users that it's an audio-only content. You also can have automatic subtitles. If you transcribe your episode with our new Ausha transcription feature, the transcript will automatically be added to YouTube as subtitle. And coming soon, you can also set custom YouTube-specific titles and thumbnails directly from Ausha for each episode that you're publishing for all podcast apps. But then by precising for YouTube specifics, you can cater to YouTube's unique search rules and keyword trends. And that's for now, because we are collaborating closely with the YouTube team in order to continuously improve our technical integration. And maybe if you can go on the next slide. Thank you, Erica. So how does the YouTube auto-publishing feature work on Ausha? First of all, I need to precise that that feature is accessible from the Boost plan, meaning that it's not accessible on from the one who are only on the Launch plan or in the free accounts. But if you do have access to these features, you can just connect it to with 3 simple steps. The first one is to link your accounts. You need to connect your YouTube account to Ausha through a simple account verification process. Then you have to activate the distribution. So you enable the distribution to YouTube on Ausha by clicking just on one button. And from then on, every new episode will be automatically pushed to your YouTube channels. Not yet in the new podcast category of YouTube, but still interesting to also be distributed in the channels according to us. But then if to categorize your content into the podcasts, the new podcast section of YouTube, then you go to your YouTube account, you click on create a new podcast and select the videos sent already by Ausha that you want to categorize as podcast. I hope that it was clear for you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. And there have been a couple questions in the chat that I'll address with this slide, because this is a meaty one. So RSS does, if you're going to choose to do it directly on YouTube, it does work a little bit differently than it does when you typically use your RSS feed through Ausha and upload to other platforms. So the first 2 steps should be familiar, where you upload your MP3 files to Ausha. They generate your RSS feed. And your hosting platform does stay the source of truth for things like your show and your episode metadata. So your show title and description, your episode title and description, and the artwork, which I'll get into in a second. But the first time that you do this, you'll need to go into YouTube Studio itself, go through the flow that I showed a couple slides ago, where you submit your RSS feed and go through the upload steps. In the upload steps, you'll see things like, what date do you want to start your upload from? You can do every episode. You can start from a certain date. You can start from today. We give you a few options for that. You can also set the visibility, where, as I mentioned, YouTube has a few different visibility options. I'm just going to talk about public and private for our sake. So for public, that means that the episodes are public on YouTube and any user can search for them and watch them and access them. With private, you've taken that away. So it means that only if somebody has the direct link to an episode, can they, actually, I believe that's even unlisted that they can see it. I think private is just fully private. It's not on YouTube at all. And that matters for when we think about things like, do we want to do video plus audio? So you'll set that visibility. We'll just, for our purposes right now, say public, and then you hit submit. Now, I'll mention a couple things here. One, YouTube does have a daily upload limit. And so we do see creators sometimes get confused where if they hit the daily upload limit and it's stuck in processing, it's not actually stuck in processing. I think our daily upload limit is something like 500 videos. It might be a little less, and I can check on that and get back. But obviously, if you're a podcaster who's been doing this for a long time, there's sometimes a lot of episodes that you want to upload to YouTube. And so sometimes it can't be possible for us to do it all in one go. We'll need to do it over the course of a couple of days. There's nothing you need to do. We'll just do that over time. The other question that we get a lot here is that you do need advanced verification on your channel to use RSS upload. Advanced verification just means you've connected your phone number to your channel and verified your identity that way. So that's another requirement for using this tool. Now, when we then go into the next step, what we do is that once you've submitted and you've hit publish and you want to go, basically what we'll do is we'll take any episode in your RSS feed and then we convert it into a video file and publish it on your behalf. If you've chosen public, we will actually publish it on your behalf. If you've chosen private, we'll have it uploaded to YouTube and then you yourself can go in and flip it to public if you so choose. We'll typically use either the show artwork that you have in your RSS feed, or if you have episode artwork uploaded to Ausha, we'll take that artwork instead and use that for your episode. So it's dependent on, do you have episode artwork? If not, we'll just use the show artwork. And it is a static image video with the audio underlaying it. It is, however, a video on YouTube. So there's a couple reasons why I emphasize this. One is that sometimes it can take a little bit longer for an episode to appear on YouTube than it would on Spotify or Apple, because we're actually taking the audio in your RSS feed and transcoding it into a video and publishing that video. So that process can take a little bit longer. The other reason why I emphasize this is that one of the differences of YouTube versus another platform is that if you re-upload the audio of your episode to your RSS feed, on any other platform, they'll notice that and they'll automatically update the audio for you. We host your content and we publish it. It's uploaded as a video on YouTube, and YouTube videos can't overwrite themselves. They can't swap. And so if you've uploaded new audio, you then actually need to go into YouTube and tell us. So there's a selection within the video editor where you can say, you hit that 3-dot menu on your video and you say re-upload to YouTube. And what we do is we take your current episode and make it private and upload your new episode as public. The reason why we do that is if you have that episode live, we don't want you to lose your analytics. So we'll keep the episode, the original, as private, just so you can still see both and add up those analytics if you need. But what we do, we take that private, we publish as public. There's 2 videos. So again, a YouTube video, once it's published, it's just there. And so we can't overwrite that for you. And that's how that works. So that is also an area of confusion and something that honestly, it is a little bit frustrating. It's just that that is unfortunately how video upload works and how YouTube works as well. So then a couple pieces of what we do and don't do. So we will publish new episodes, like I said. We will also update episode titles and descriptions if you change them on your RSS feed. So if you have a title and you decide to swap it, we'll notice that and we'll then redo it on YouTube. We won't do that at the show level, that was honestly just based off an assumption that you're not really changing the name of your podcast or its description all that often. And so we don't pull that from the RSS feed. But the other thing with episodes is that if you decide that you want to take a different strategy on YouTube, obviously YouTube is the second largest SEO platform in the world. So sometimes creators want to do something different with their episode titles or their descriptions and metadata. If you change that on YouTube, we'll honor that you changed it. We won't revert it back to what's on the RSS feed. This is by no means a requirement. And honestly, I would say experiment and figure out what works for you. Sometimes I would say even having the same episode titles across platforms is just easier for a viewer who wants to maybe listen and watch or just more easily find your podcast. So you don't need to do bespoke titles for your episodes on YouTube. But again, sometimes it can be helpful for SEO optimization to do that way. Let me make sure I covered some of the questions. Oh, there was the one I wanted to highlight and why I went in on public versus private. So if you are doing both video and audio, here's what you do. So it depends which one you've done first. I'll take the seat of I'm an audio first creator who wants to get into video. So I go onto YouTube, I add my RSS feed, I do the upload process that I've talked about. We're good, we're publishing, we're public, it's all good to go. But I've decided that I want to start doing video. So what I recommend you do in that case is on your podcast playlist, you would actually then on the podcast details page, change your episode visibility to private from public. So private is when it's not available on YouTube, it's just visible to you in YouTube Studio. Then on that podcast playlist, you can upload videos to that playlist as well. And so for an episode that I want to upload video for, I'd upload it, good to go. If then for the next episode, I actually don't have video, I want to just use the audio for it, you should still probably keep your episode visibility to private. But then when you see the new episode available in YouTube Studio from RSS, on that individual video, flip the visibility to public. So that's the way to do it if you started. The way to do it if you've done video first and you have a video playlist is in the podcast details page for that playlist. There's an option if you scroll down to connect RSS feed. And then what that will do once you hit that button is you'll go through that RSS upload flow, same flow that I just talked about, where you'll submit your RSS feed and do that. But again, keep your visibility as private, because then when you have episodes that, again, you don't have video for, on that individual video level, you'll flip to public. So it's really just a play of the visibility of the different episodes in your feed and doing video when you can, or flipping RSS uploaded episodes to public when you can't do video. This is like 3.0, honestly. The easiest thing to do is just to do your RSS upload, do it through Ausha, do it on YouTube Studio, whatever works, and just do it that way. But if you do want to be able to use both, we have help center content on that as well, recognizing that was just a lot to cover. So I will flip to, yes, analytics. So YouTube has some great analytics, and we really tout ourselves on having a ton of information available to you. So we have views and watch time, of course, but we also have things like performance metrics, traffic sources, audience demographics, audience retention, which can be really, really helpful to learning where audiences drop off, revenue data. Erica was talking about the YouTube Partner Program. You can see your views on YouTube Music versus YouTube Main, just a ton of information available. And honestly, the biggest recommendation that we have is test and iterate and use YouTube Analytics. I'm sure you use your hosting platform to do this as well. Learn from the data. What episodes resonate, what doesn't, where do people drop off, where are they coming from? If they're coming from Google search, that means you're doing something right with optimization. On YouTube, the majority of users come from Watch Next, which is the recommended content when you're kind of in that rabbit hole of watching YouTube. That is the number one way that users discover new content, which is good because that's really just about discoverability and making sure you're optimized. But home is another popular surface, search, of course. And so there's a lot to learn just from YouTube overall. And then I think we can actually skip this next slide because we already covered it with Jennifer, unless there's anything you want to add on.
No, it's perfect. Thank you, Emma.
Cool. Okay, channel management, and then we'll get into Q&A because I recognize we're a little short on time. So the biggest thing with YouTube is that we are different than other platforms. I think there's a misconception a little bit that you can just put your content on YouTube and just let it sit. And you can, like, anybody can do that. It just means that you're probably not going to see the growth that you might see just because you're an established podcast on other channels. It's a different website. It's a different surface. You still need to do things to optimize your content for that audience. Channel branding and management is a really good one to do. So you have your channel banner at the top. This is kind of the billboard for your channel page overall. So if you're a network, make it broad to your network. If you're a podcast, make it a banner for your podcast. Sometimes we see creators do something like new episodes on Tuesdays in the channel banner to just set the expectation right away for when viewers can expect new content. However you want to do that, think about that's the first thing that a viewer is going to see. The channel avatar is the most common thing that users see. So the channel avatar is what appears next to your name on comments if you comment back to your viewers. It's on different videos on your homepage. It's right next to your handle. And so use the channel avatar to do either your show art if you're just doing it for your podcast, or just general branding if you're a network, a media company, whatever. And then the channel trailer is another really, really good thing to use if you want to just tease viewers on what to expect with your content. And you can set your trailer to be different for subscribers versus those who have not subscribed to your channel. So sometimes we'll see creators do a little bit more of a high level overview of what their content's about for non-subscribers. But then for subscribers, they might tease something that's new or that's coming, or use it as a little bit more of an anticipation space. And then lastly, playlist shelves. So I talked earlier about using playlists and podcasts. I'll just emphasize this again because I think I saw a couple questions on this in the chat. One podcast for each show that you have. Again, think about it like your RSS feed. You don't have multiple RSS feeds for different forms of your podcast. I don't think, at least. It's not super common. So think about your podcast playlist, just one, full episodes, but then use playlists to your advantage for things like seasons, themes, guests, etc. Use shorts as a really good way to optimize where, if you want to reach new audiences on shorts, and then link them to the full episode through that short to full episode linking, you can do that. Segments are another one, which basically that's a regular video upload, but maybe it's 6 to 7 minutes instead of an hour and a half. There's really a lot that you can do here. The thing that I will say about short form as another way to optimize your content and add new audiences. So we've done some research that essentially there's a upper limit of 7 segments that you could do to reach incremental audiences on YouTube. It's a really high number. I would have personally expected something like maybe 2, but you can do up to 7 clips from a full episode and reach a new audience and not cannibalize your existing audience. More to come here. We're trying to make it easier for creators to create clips from their full episode content. But some of the user research that we've done leading up to some of the product solutions we want to help creators with is suggesting that clips see a different audience than long form does. When you think about it, that's not that surprising. There are certain people that only want to watch vertical short form on TikTok Shorts or Reels. There are people that want to watch longer form on YouTube, but they burn out after 6 to 7 minutes. Then there's people that really want to dive into the entire hour, hour and a half, and have it on in the background or just watch it like a talk show. And so you're reaching new audiences that way. And then with shorts to full episode linking, that's a really good way to say, I have shorts for my episodes to tease, to introduce myself to new audiences. But then if they want to dive in deeper, they can then access the full episode. So that's what I'll say there. And then the last thing I do want to emphasize here is that thumbnails are really, really important to YouTube. So if you think about thumbnails for your episodes, the one actually on the screen is kind of a bad example of it, where you can see that all of their thumbnails are exactly the same. As a viewer, this is very confusing and kind of boring. Even if you use RSS upload, you can still do custom thumbnails for your content. And Jennifer was saying how with Ausha, you'll be able to do that through that integration soon as well. Thumbnails are really helpful to making your content stand out. So if I'm a viewer scrolling on home or on your channel page, I can get a tease of what your content is actually about through your thumbnail. Some of the things we recommend here are doing the host face in your thumbnail. If you are a recognizable personality or if your host is consistent, you could do the host and the guest together. You don't have to do that, especially if you're not comfortable being on camera. You can do more dynamic visuals. You can put the title in there. There's so much that you can play with. We're soon rolling out thumbnail A/B testing too globally, where you'll be able to actually, if you want to, do 2 different ones and see what resonates better with your audience. There's also just a ton of content on YouTube about this. Mr. Beast has a lot of opinions about what worked for him with his thumbnails. So I'd encourage you to access just YouTube content overall and see what other creators are doing and what they're doing well. Because thumbnails, I think people think they're not a big deal. They actually can be really helpful. Titles are another one. As I mentioned, you don't have to do 2 different things, but sometimes to optimize for SEO, it can be really helpful to do that. So I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to skip over resources. We will send out more later, but why don't we get into Q&A?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Emma and Erica, for this insightful and very complete presentation. Guys, if you have a question, so we will be moving soon to the live Q&A, but just a few words before, in case you still have some thoughts after the session, here are 3 resources for you and might help you later on. Let me just begin a slide for you. First, and I think Erica and Emma is still online, right? You guys on your side have a giant podcasting guide, offer more than 60 slide guide full of useful tips, and I think we can find it quite easily on your help center. You can also go on our Ausha's blog. We have several articles, including tips for improving visibility on YouTube and other channels. And you can also reach our Ausha's customer success team. Our team is also composed of professional podcasters who are always ready to help within 24 hours. Plus, we have a comprehensive help center with a lot of step-by-step tutorials on Ausha about our own futures. So, sorry. All right. I think I've given my team enough time to select the questions. So let's start the Q&A. Erica and Emma, are you ready? So the first question from Alex. If the podcast audios included ads, are we still allowed to upload them on YouTube?
Yeah, great question. And I think with RSS, it plays in as well. So third-party ads read by an announcer voice are not allowed. Post-read promotions are allowed. That's the simplest way to think about it. With RSS upload, the reason why we still recommend you upload an ad-free RSS feed is, as I mentioned, when a video is on YouTube, it's just published on YouTube. That's why we don't support dynamic ad insertion, because it's published and it's there. But any ads that you had at the time that we pull it from your RSS feed will then be burned into your video. And technically anything read by a third-party voice violates our sponsored content policies. And so we recommend ad-free feed, or if you're doing video, ad-free video, except for ones read by your own voice, or if it, the host or, whoever's doing the podcast.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but in case of house read ads integrating into the content, then we need to precise that there are promotional content within, right?
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. So yes,
I read the giant guidelines, from YouTube. So
you read them better than I have. Both on video, you can check off a box that says this video contains paid product placement. With RSS upload, what you can actually do is when you're going through the upload process, you can do this at the overall show level. And the checkbox says, I think most episodes of my podcast contain paid promotion. So what this will do is it'll automatically then have that checked off for every episode that gets added to your RSS feed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Emma. Another question from Sam. How many people are listening or watching podcasts on YouTube Music versus YouTube Main?
This is a really great question. So we can't show the specific numbers, but I will say that the bulk of consumption does happen on YouTube Main today. The primary reason for this is that YouTube Music, podcasts and YouTube Music is less than a year old. We only rolled out to all global markets. EMEA was our last rollout, actually, in October of last year. So we do have a lot of growth happening. We are actually seeing very, very strong growth in our YouTube Music numbers as well. It just is, YouTube Main has an audience of over 2.3 billion monthly logged in users. With YouTube Music, we've just hit over 100 million paid subscribers across YouTube Music and Premium, I believe. And so one, it's a smaller product. Two, it's a very new product. And so even though we're seeing growth there, YouTube Main will probably always be the lion's share of podcast consumption. And Living Room actually is our fastest growing YouTube surface. So there's an interesting blog post on this where I think we just saw over 1 billion monthly active viewers of living room content. And it is the fastest growing source of YouTube watch time. So I wouldn't discount living room as part of the puzzle.
Yeah. Okay. And another question from Sam. Can you tell us about the conversion metrics from shorts to full episode? It seems from our test like it's two different audience segments.
So I don't know a ton about the specifics of conversion. Honestly, probably someone from the shorts team would, but it doesn't surprise me that it's two different audiences just based on what I was saying a little bit earlier about how we do see incremental audience opportunity by doing short form versus long form. It's YouTube. I'm sure there is some overlap, and I don't know if we have any of that data published, but I would say that it's worth doing shorts either for incremental or just to convert more shorts to long form through that linking.
Okay, good to know. A question from Alaya. Can you talk more about naming an episode for better visibility? And also, do you have an example of an audio podcast doing really well on YouTube?
Ooh. So, sorry, the question on naming was like just
like for the episode title. What would be your tips, to get a better visibility? For example, in some podcast apps, they have like very strict guidelines, about the naming to the episode or things to not do, for example. And do you have like similar guidelines in YouTube?
Yeah. So we don't have strict guidelines, honestly. And if you go on YouTube, you can see some crazy stuff happening. I think there's a lot of creators that actually put emojis in their title. Here's what I would say. So first, there is a subset of Google Trends called YouTube Trends, which is really, really helpful. You can search keywords related to some of the topics that you post about and see which keywords are trending on YouTube overall. That can be a really helpful resource for what to include in your episode titles. I also imagine that extends to the RSS ecosystem, given that it's an overall pulse on SEO generally. And so I think that could be helpful elsewhere, not just on YouTube. But use keywords at the beginning and make sure the first 70 characters of your title are the most optimized. The first couple words should really, really be your most optimized towards what my content is actually about. So I would not recommend starting a title with episode 1, because the thing that people are going to see, especially on mobile, is just episode 1, which isn't informative. Yeah. So I would instead start with the informative piece, because on mobile especially, titles will get cut off. Tease your viewer, really draw them in with those first couple words. And then if you want to add anything afterwards, like episode 1 or episode 2, just do it at the end.
Yeah, and I fully support your suggestion for sure. There's one reaction, not question, in the chat. I recall it was from E.B. Moss, who were stating that, when you were explaining that when you have both, the audio content coming from the RSS feed, and when you start to do video, and when you explain, how to deactivate the audio contents only to put it private and put the video, etc., and some of them were reacting and saying like, what if we do both? We just publish both the video content and having the same content in audio only format. Would it be okay or efficient?
It's not bad. It's just that if you do that, you're going to split your listenership for a single episode across 2 different podcasts. So it's up to you. If you're fine with that, by all means, go ahead. One podcast that does that actually we do usually include as a case study is Fall of Civilizations. So they're a UK-based history podcast. And the reason I think mainly why they do it is because their episodes are something like 2 to sometimes even 3 hours long, and they're really highly produced video. And so it takes them a little bit longer to upload the video for an episode than it does to upload the RSS. So they use both RSS upload to just kind of get the episodes out there on time. And then within a week or 2, they'll upload to the separate video podcast. It works well for them, but you will see they're a great best in class example. Their video episodes see something like 5.4 million views per episode. Their RSS uploaded episodes see about 1.5 million views per episode. That's still a lot. That's great. And if you combine it across both, that's really, really great. But I would think about it as, one, the RSS is a bit less than the video. YouTube, we really are trying to make audio more optimized for YouTube generally, for creators and for users who prefer to consume audio. So it is top of mind for us. But YouTube is a video platform, especially for a 3-hour episode. Video is going to do a bit better. But then you could also think about if that was just combined, that's, 7 million views. separate. So it's not a bad thing. It's honestly probably easier for you to just do it that way. So if you're just starting out, take the easy route, just see what works for you. We don't want to make this too labor intensive, but it's probably more optimal to have just one podcast for people to listen to them to.
Okay, that's interesting, because we can easily assume that, like the YouTube users consuming audio only content might not be, the same as the one, looking for only video content. So, but thank you for that precision, Emma. Maybe one last for the road from Rosen. What kind of video do you advise for the podcast? Waves, free credit video, or video of the host recording the podcast? Do you see big difference on statistic? And if I recall well, someone asked in the chat earlier, like, for example, if they just put some pictures, the dioramas, that work as well?
Erica, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, so basically everything, you can look at everything as tiered. We don't have exact numbers, but we do know that like full-fledged video, like seeing our faces, even like you're seeing it today and potentially a Zoom call or whatever it might be, is going to be the most useful form of visuals that you can have. But we think everything, is tiered. And if you, just want to add in some waveform or animation or a slideshow of pictures, if you have a true crime podcast, whatever it may be, those are all very useful visual aids and elements. And we know that there's benefit to them as opposed to just having like your show art run for the full hour-long podcast or however long your podcast is. But yeah, as I said at the beginning, the best situation is to see your host's face in some capacity and talk in that capacity. That would be, the number one way to look at it. But any type of visual aid below that is also beneficial.
Okay. Sorry, Emma.
I was just going to say, one of the things that can work too that we sometimes see is a video intro with audio for the rest of it. So if just the host is on camera for the first 1 minute saying like, hey, this is this episode, we're talking about XYZ, or you do like think about the intro for your episode on video. And then the rest is waveform, static image, text on screen. That can be a nice way, because obviously that first minute really matters to engage a viewer, and then let them know what to expect for the rest of it.
That's an interesting and good practice, because then you can just fulfill the curiosity from the users in order to see the face behind the voice or in front of the voice. But and then just move on with the audio only content. Great. Well, thank you so much to you, Erica and Emma. I wish we could spend the whole evening together and day together, but we need to wrap up and let Erica and Emma go. Talking about you guys, really thank you for your time. Thank you for your qualitative presentation and your wonderful energy. Guys on the chat, let's give them a round of applause emoji if you enjoyed the session. And thank you as well, dear audience, for your enthusiasm. And it's clear that the topic has sparked a lot of interest from what I can see. And on our side, the entire Ausha team and I are at your disposal. If you need anything, you can reach us at hello@ausha.co or through our website, ausha.co. Meanwhile, take care and see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.